Social media lies. Here is the truth.
You are a millennial / conservative. How does that even happen? Because public education does not want that to happen. Culture does not want that to happen.
What I find is that, all these liberal things that you see, and I'm going to say both sides have their own hypocrisies, but, you see these protests and riots, and these things just don't appeal to me. I understand there's going to be some things that I don't like, but in reality, marching and blocking streets is not the way to solve these problems.
You've almost solidified in your beliefs rather than the other way, which they are intended to do.
My belief that it is absolutely despicable to do things like burn the flag or kneel during the national anthem, Colin Kaepernick, whatever his last name is.
Mm-hmm.
I have very little respect for people who are going to do it, because there's people who have died fighting for your freedom that we don't have in places like China and Saudi Arabia. Thousands of soldiers have died over the years fighting for this country, and you have the audacity to kneel during this song that, honors them. And
yeah, and what would you say the stereotypical millennial counter argument to that would be? Why
freedom of speech, but at the same time, they're also trying to shut down free speech by, going after anyone who says anything offensive. And we had gone into the city for the weekend, and this was the day of the Women's March. And I remember getting off the train, we had to fight through all these people to get into the city. It was like Times Square on New Year's Eve. It was awful. Part of the reason why I come across more conservatives really is because, I have a job. I work. I feel like a lot of these people who are out protesting and rioting would have a much better life if they just applied for a job. Come on.
So you think it's just fundamental idleness? Is that what you're trying to say? They're just sitting around playing Xbox and just wasting their time?
Well, you see a lot of people who are, especially on the internet, where people will just, start attacking each other. Don't you guys have anything better? For me, if Hillary Clinton had won the election, would I be going out in the streets and rioting? No, because I had to go to work the next morning.
Yeah. So idle hands truly are the devil's workshop. That actually makes sense. Some things aren't that complicated. You got a bunch of people unemployed. You got 100 million people unemployed. You got young people that are disenfranchised. You can relate to this, I think, on some level. Let me ask you a question from somebody who isn't a millennial to somebody that isn't a millennial. A lot of times when these grievances come up, on the surface, I have some empathy. I'll give you an example. They are graduating with massive amounts of debt. They are washing up on a shore without any jobs. There are economic hurdles that are unique to their generation. What's fascinating, though, Gabe, is they never seem to blame the ideology that has brought those things about. It has been fiscal policies from the Democrats that have caused that job in the Sierra Desert. It has been the debt. The reason that the liberals run these colleges, the reason these colleges are outrageous is because they're subsidized by the government. So, in other words, how are these things that are perpetrated on them from the left then turned around and blamed some bank or they blamed some business guy for things?
Let me put it this way. It seems like a lot of millennials do not know how to take responsibility for their own actions or for themselves. For me, I'm putting off college until I know I can pay for it, because I would like to avoid taking out student loans if I can. So right now, I'm on my 5th job. I've gone to multiple jobs to kind of get the experience. But as I get more and more experience, once I get out of college, I'll have that experience as well as that education below my belt to go to an interview with and put on my resume and stuff.
Right.
And I think a lot of it has to do with people making very poor fiscal choices. And the idea of free education, I know you didn't really ask about that.
They're very interested. Yeah.
Because
it certainly is your generation's calling.
Yeah. The problem with that is you look at public schools, Palmyra is fortunate enough to have enough money to pay for things like outdoor education and the music department and all that stuff. But you look at schools like Philadelphia, where they don't have these things. And especially in some of these poor areas, these children are subject to crime and poverty. The thing is, if college is free, who pays? The taxpayers do. And me, I'm only 18 years old, and I still owe the government. I don't need to be paying more taxes.
But that is not a common thought, and I wonder if it's because they're not paying taxes, or is it because they believe? Is it because they believe the government really is the solution to these things? And if so, how is an incompetent government that has failed at everything convince a generation that they're the solution to the problem? I sit back as a non-millennial at just bewilderment.
Yeah.
At that trance, that like hocus pocus magic trick.
As a millennial, I'm bewildered by this. Like for me, I want everything that I earn to be hard earned. I don't want to win the lottery. I want to earn everything that I get.
Well, now, do you think it's that they don't agree with that, or I get the impression in talking to them that they feel like there's this onious boogeyman that's screwing them out of stuff. Like when you talk to them, it's not so much that the Bernie Sanders, the free. It's more like they feel like somebody has screwed them, and somebody owes them, and somebody needs to cowboy up what they're owed. Or am I reading this wrong? Well, it's more like they feel like they're on the short end of a deal or something.
Yeah, the only thing that's holding them back is them. How things go in the future really goes on the decisions that you make in the present.
By that is what I experience from your average millennial. Of course, these are blanket statements. There's exceptions to all these statements. I would consider you to be an exception. But the emotional, they're like tissue paper. To speak of something to them is to offend them personally. I'll give you an example. If I were to say, this forest is an ugly forest, that doesn't mean I'm saying each individual tree of this forest is hideously ugly. You can make these statements of fact without taking them personally. If I were to say, generally people with green shirts are this way, that still allows just commonsensical room for people with exception. It appears to me in my experience that the millennial will take everything, every comment into their personhood. My question to you is, how is this is unique to your generation. And it also impedes conversation because everything is going to be a fly off the handle situation. Or I got to run stuck on my thumb in fetal position in the padded room with the puppy, which is a real thing.
Yes.
How do you self-correct? How do you speak? How do you have a relationship? What is the reason that this is all cropping up in the millennials? Like, why are they so emotional, so hypersensitive?
Well, here's the first thing. And I'm going to start by talking about myself because I have an advantage. Being in customer service, I've kind of learned to brush things off my shoulder and just let it go over my head.
All right, there's a lot of abuse in customer service.
But I learned how to brush it off. But I feel like one of the biggest things is, in school and stuff, people are awarded participant ribbon and stuff for doing absolutely nothing.
So you think those stereotypical anecdotes are true?
They are very true.
You think it's that the muscles of fortitude have not been worked?
And the other thing is, we're kind of all shielded from all this. We're not being challenged in school. If we were being challenged and stuff in school, both middle school, high school, and in college, and we were.
When you say challenge, what do you mean opposing opposition?
Yeah,
is that what you mean?
Exactly. But the only problem is, it seems like in high school it's wrong to hold conservative opinions. And my biggest hot button issue is freedom of speech and keeping freedom of speech.
You and I have that in common. And it's very insightful for you to say this because that's the linchpin. When that goes, everything goes. Because if you can't speak to one another, you can't self-correct. You can't do anything.
And I feel like this problem with I'm gonna say something kind of derogatory toward my generation. At least half of my generation are snowflakes. That's a nice way of putting it. A snowflake is someone who is offended by opposing views and needs safe spaces because they're afraid of opposing views. For example, during the election season at University of Pittsburgh, someone, I think it was a spray paint or chalk, put the word Trump somewhere. And people were so offended. They felt threatened. They felt scared. So they needed safe spaces. They had to offer counseling for these students. That is pathetic.
Because I hear stories like that, and obviously, like every other American citizen, we roll our eyes. Is it that they're offended, or is it that they've come to realize that if they act offended, they sort of garner power by? So I guess what I'm asking you is, do you think there's genuineness to this? In other words, are they offended? Because maybe they really are. Are they really afraid? Are they really that shaken up? Or do they know if they start acting like that, they're going to, I can't decide which one it is.
Well, it goes both ways. So, when it comes to Trump, people don't like Trump because there's this whole anti-Trump rhetoric, and that's what millennials are, going after
bathed
Trump.
in. Yeah, they are. You're right.
Now,
it creates a current. It creates almost like when you're in high school.
Yeah.
And there's peer pressure and stuff.
It goes case by case. For example,
yeah, it does.
You talk about the whole Middle East ban. Millennials are afraid of, coming across as, racist or hateful or bigoted because people will label them if they disagree. For example, I'm sure you saw my post about the Women's March and how I thought it was disgusting that women were going shirtless in Chicago. And people were saying, how dare you? How dare you? You get to look at your boobs every day. And I'm like, I don't go without a shirt, okay? You don't see me not wearing a shirt. When it comes to dividing races and stuff, for whatever reason, millennials seem to think that we need to divide people by race and, treat them all differently. And I'm considered racist when I say, okay, just because you're black doesn't mean you should be treated any differently than me. Like, for example, I feel like everyone should be held to the same standard. And I've been called racist for that.
Yeah, right.
But
because the term has shifted.
The word has lost all meaning at this point.
Yeah.
And to say, the biggest thing that baffles me is to say that because you want to ban Muslims from your country, you're racist. Now, I don't think it's the best way of handling things, but it's a gray area because people coming from the Middle East aren't U.S. citizens. But, just like Christianity is not a race, Islam is not a race. They are both religions.
My gut tells me a lot of these issues, case by case, in the case of millennials, are not thought through. It's more just like a culture of thinking has been created, and nobody wants to buck that culture of thinking. And that's a sort of a sad thing.
Well, I think what they're really afraid of, too, is being called things like bigoted and racist. I've been called all of these things, but you know what? I've been called hateful, I've been called anti-female, which I find very ironic.
Let me ask you one final thing. Moving forward, and I'm speaking again specifically to millennials, with all the things that are making the news, everything from the colleges busting out into just crazy accord, to the safe spaces, to the Bernie Sanders nonsense, to the whole package of what millennials are really earning quite a reputation in society. They're almost like a butt of a joke.
Yeah.
What is your advice moving forward to remedy some of this stuff? So in other words, what can culture do as a whole to address some of these things in effective ways? Is there any advice?
Millennials or advice to non-millennials?
Kind of like advice to non-millennials as to how to approach this. Do you appease it? Do you just forget it? Do you run roughshod over it? What's your opinion? How is society going to deal with what you deem as snowflakes?
Well, the best way you can do is just to stand firm when you say something, because millennials are going to keep trying to fight until they get their way. Just don't give in.
Thanks for stepping into the lion's den. You've been a great guest. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. Take it easy.
I think the liberal media, and I've been dealing with you a long time, need to get your head out of your butt, focus on the real issues.